It's time now for the KC Ingram Show on WSTU. The opinions expressed are those of the program host and guest and not necessarily those of WSTU. WSTU does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WSTU. It's time to call in with your questions and comments at 220-9788, 220-WSTU. And now, here's KC Ingram.
The KC Ingram Show is brought to you in part by Meridian Marina and Yacht Club in Palm City. Tired of lines at the boat launch, sun damage, or not using your boat because of the hassle? Call Meridian Marina and Yacht Club because we do all the work so you can enjoy your boating lifestyle. We store your boat inside, launch it with a wash with just 30 minutes notice, and rinse it down before putting it back. Need new electronics, service, detailing, bottom paint? No problem. Our experienced certified techs will make sure your boat is in tip-top shape and ready to head to the sandbar, fishing, or the Bahamas. Call us up at 772-221-8198. That's 221-8198. Or visit us online at meridianmarina.com. Well, folks, I was on a little holiday hiatus, and boy, is it good to be back. Happy New Year. Yes. I am so excited to be back, and we are kicking off 2019 with a fabulous show that is a forefront of topics right here in Martin County and beyond. And I want to thank Paul Laura here for coming in.
You're welcome.
You have a lot of information, a lot of different topics, but we're going to focus on LNG and transport of it here in the Treasure Coast today.
Thank you for letting me come on board.
Oh, I appreciate it very much. And after the show, we're going to put some links on as well to some of your groups that's helping or trying to fight for safety regulations. So, Paul, let's just start out here. What is LNG? Is it like what we put on our gas tanks on our grills at home, or what?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion on this. So I thank you for asking that question. Let's first start with the basic pipeline. Okay, the basic pipeline is pretty much shipped in pipelines at ambient temperatures and under a small amount of pressure. Okay, so there are some times when they corrode or whatever, but basically they are just in pipelines, relatively low pressure and at ambient temperatures. Then you have that which we use for barbecues. That's in a canister. That's under a little bit more pressure. Not considered outwardly really dangerous, but is under pressure. Where the difference is on LNG is liquid natural gas, or natural gas, let me put it that way, is not really, is for export. In order to make it commercially viable, we have to put it under a liquid rather than a gas so that we can fill up the volume with a liquid and a heavier weight. So you have to freeze it down to minus 259 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a lot more than any kind of gases that we normally see. As a result of that, that's why you see these big bulk carriers, and they put as much liquid into it as possible. And that's mainly to make it commercially viable for export. So the important thing is liquid natural gas is really for export.
And it's a more expensive fuel. That's why we export it, because here it's cheaper for us to use the natural gas or the propane gas, correct?
Right. The pipelines and the regular barbecue type tanks that we have, that's much more less expensive. So you can have it in a gaseous form because you can transmit it and it's not a problem. But if you're going over thousands of miles of ocean, you need to have as much volume as you can. And the only way to make it economically viable is to cool it down to minus 259 degrees Fahrenheit.
Which is a tremendously cold. And what happens, let's say, should there be an accident and that cryogenically frozen LNG?
Yeah, that's another area which I don't think people are really aware of. But as you know, they are shipped now in tank cars up and down the east coast of Florida. And the problem, they are double hulled, so there is some safety there. But the problem is that if there should be an accident, and a little bit of a hole exists, that gas being at minus 259 degrees, it's going to want to come out to be at ambient temperatures. It wants to be a gas. And so you have roughly, let's say a typical tank car, maybe 10,000 gallons. Okay. So you're going to have now all this gas, all this liquid becoming a gas, and it's going to form a cloud. And basically it's methane. And what happens is the density of the methane is fairly heavy, so it will sit close to the surface of the ground. It won't, as some people indicate, just go up in the air and you don't have to worry about it. The density of the methane will force it to be more ground level rather than just going up into the atmosphere. As a result of that, it forms a cloud, and the cloud will move according to the wind. But once it's very combustible and once it hits a spark, the whole cloud will ignite, and anything within that cloud will be instantly incinerated. So a typical tank car could be a mile radius.
Wow.
So you can think of it going through Stewart, and you can think about a mile radius, and that's just one car. Now, don't forget that the limit for transportation is 10 tank cars. So now let's say they all are contaminated. You are talking about a very serious accident. And the worst problem is that in talking to the fire department doesn't have the equipment nor the training to be able to handle such a fire. They'd have to just let it burn itself out.
How long has LNG been transported in the United States by rail?
This is a relatively new thing. There are no laws in Florida, and basically they were just starting this about 2 years ago, when FERC, who is the Federal Energy Commission, Regulatory Commission, they just decided that they were not going to pay attention to small inland plants. The plant that we're speaking of here in Florida is near Hialeah Rail Yard. And there's a plant there, and they said, we're not going to pay attention to that, the smaller plants. So we don't even understand whether they are abiding by all the rules and regulations in that facility, because there's nobody who's accountable for it at this point.
That's absolutely incredible. What about the state of Florida itself? Are there regulations through our state over LNG plants and transportation of it?
There are no state laws in Florida. There are some in New York and in Massachusetts, but Florida is really open, and they're dependent upon the federal government. The problem is FERC is the main overseer, and they have decided that for small plants located inland, they are not going to pay attention to it. And so basically they're getting away without really a lot of oversight. That's the concern.
Have they defined what a small plant is?
Yeah, not really. We don't really have that information as to how small a plant is. But basically, what we're doing here is they are looking at larger coastal plants. So if it's on the coast and it's in a harbor area, then they pay attention to it. But if it's inland, they don't.
Which Hialeah is not that far from the coast. So, it kind of astounds me a little bit that it has to literally be on the coast by the sounds of it. I mean, Hialeah is not that far from the coast.
Yeah. And I just want to give you some idea of the quantity. I mean, over the last 2-3 years or so, they've shipped millions of gallons. I mean, we're talking tens of millions of gallons of product overseas. Down into the Caribbean is their main market at the moment, but they're going to expand because of the excess surplus these days of natural gas coming from Texas, mainly.
Okay. Okay. So what do we need to do, and what are you working on with your groups to ensure some safety regulations? I mean, you talked about the lack of safety regulations. You talked about the FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They're the ones that need to start out with safety regulations. Right. So what do we need to do to make sure these safety regulations are in place? I mean, let's face it, there's over just about 7 million people in South Florida alone that these cars are traveling through.
Well, we have two ideas or two pathways that we are approaching at the moment. One is it all starts with FERC. I mean, because they start off with deciding on the safety of a plant. And then after that, if they say it's okay, then of course the Federal Railroad Administration comes in and they say, okay, now you can ship it by rail. And then it comes up into the coast, and then it goes into the harbor where the Coast Guard takes over and says, okay, is this safe or not? The problem is they're mainly working in silos. So the FERC has certain responsibilities, Federal Railroad Administration has certain responsibilities, and the Coast Guard has certain responsibilities, but they all are only doing what their responsibilities are. So if FERC's not paying attention, and they're not sending out any signals, then the Federal Railroad says, well, we have no signals coming in from FERC, so we're going to do what we do, and since nobody's objecting, we're going to allow that to occur. So, you build a very false foundation over a period of time, and an accident is waiting to happen. Just to mention one more thing. So when you're coming by rail, the maximum speed that you can take by rail coming through up the coast is 40 miles an hour, and you're allowed up to 10 tank cars per train. But as you know, we've got Brightline coming on.
Right.
All right. And Brightline can go up to 110, and you got normal freight running up at 80. And then you have this going at 40. And how many times have we heard in the past how one train has run into another train, or the switch wasn't done correctly, or somebody wasn't paying attention? So this is an accident waiting to happen in our view. So what we've done is coming back to the pathways, is we've said, okay, we're going to sue FERC. And we have a legal group in Washington, and we're putting together funding. And that once we finish with the donations, we will then move forward with a suit against FERC because they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They've just abdicated their responsibility. The other area that we want to do is we want to have state laws and oversight. So if you look at the oversight here currently, the Department of Environmental Protection, Florida Department of Environmental Protection, we called them and we asked them, how are you surveying this area in Hialeah? The only thing they're doing is taking current samples of air. That's the extent of it. But if you get this leaking, then it's all over already.
Right.
So by the time you detect it, it's already occurred. The explosion and the fire potential, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk with the agricultural commissioner, and we've started a relationship with Nikki Freed, and we're hoping that she will be able to pay more attention of the dangers and bring about some change. But she's just one person, and that's a large uphill battle that we would expect for Nikki.
Certainly, and that's something where we as constituents really need to let our elected officials know that this is a concern, and there needs to be safety regulations in the state of Florida, not only federally, but here for our state to protect ourselves. This is such a new technology, and I want to reiterate what you just said. We're talking about 3 different speeds on one set of tracks, 40 miles an hour for the LNG tanker cars. Freight can go up to 80, and then the passenger rail can go up to 110 here, 120 in Brevard County. So you do have these 3 different speeds on one track, and accidents do happen. And I'll also say traditionally, freight companies do not like to run on the same line as passenger because of that speed difference. Yeah. So that's an accident waiting to happen. And speaking of accidents, have there ever been an accident with LNG yet? I know it's very new.
Well, there was a storage facility out in Washington, and this is where you get into the problems, is that there was an explosion. And the problem is that a lot of the information that we asked for was not received. They're keeping it out of the public eye. So when this happened, they just redacted a lot of the information and just give you a limited amount. So we really don't understand everything that happened, but what we do know is the fire department more or less had to let it burn itself out.
Wow. I'll tell you what, Paul, when Congressman Mast was first running for Congress, he came in the studio here, and I still have the show, but he spoke about the LNG and the dangers from a terrorism aspect. What happens if a terrorist would attack some of these tanker cars? And he said, you know what? Us talking about it doesn't matter. If we're talking about it, they've already thought about it. And that's what folks have to realize here. So when we talk about these tanker cars, what kind of testing has been done to make sure they are terrorism safe as well as accident safe should the train derail or get hit by a car?
Right. There was a car developed, and it's being tested actually in Alaska because of the fact that it's out and away from all the public on this. And from what we understand, the testing report has not been finalized yet. But this was supposed to be the car which they would use. And as I said, we don't have the information. So what they've done, though, here is they're using cars which are used for other petrochemicals, the double hulled. And they say, well, that's completely safe. But we really don't know that. And like you said, if we have a terrorist attack, that gas, that liquid is going to want to be gassed pretty quickly, and it'll already have a combustible source. So you could see that potentially this could be really devastating going through public areas.
Absolutely, it's devastating. And you had mentioned the fire chief here in Martin County has stated that they don't know how, to put out a fire with LNG right now. And they did some really good studies here in the past, and it's on the Board of County Commissioner website
Right.
of if the air is blowing, east, west, north, south, where that bubble of LNG would flow to and the
Right.
potential impacts. And folks, I really recommend you go there and look because it's a little frightening to think that this could happen here.
It really is, and I want to compliment the fire chief, and also Ruth Holmes, who's also been involved in this, and we all see the dangers. And a letter was sent to Governor Scott indicating this, and he never answered. By the fire chief, he sent a very nice, very detailed letter, and said, "Hey, we don't have equipment, we don't have the training. What are we going to do about this if you're going to promote this?" And he never got an answer.
Which that's very unfortunate because this is truly a safety issue, and I feel our elected officials should be protecting our health, safety, and welfare. The other thing I want to bring up, Paul, is we have a special situation here in Stewart with our bridge because it's single tracked. So now we're talking about 3 speeds, but also we do have just 1 track. So there's certainly room for error and a lot of bottlenecking going on right here in Stewart.
Yeah, I've actually reached out to Representative Mast on this, and we're talking about what can we do, because you have traffic going, you're going to have much more traffic, you're going to have Brightline now, you're going to have increased freight, and you're going to have LNG. And how are we going to handle the bridge? Because like you said, it's only 1 track, and how is that going to be affected by all of this? I mean, you're talking about a bridge that was built in the early last century.
Right.
So,
right.
so it's it's another concern, a real bottleneck, especially if it's only a single track. But even if they have double track, it's a matter of switching. And we've seen in Pennsylvania and other places in the United States where just passenger trains and freight trains have collided because of where the switches have frozen or they've corroded or someone's not paying attention. This is a really serious issue.
It is. And I will say you're absolutely right, even with the double track, because trains are going north and south. So you're still having 3 different speeds. So somewhere they have to move over to a sideline and wait, and you're hoping that there is no human error,
yes.
So that there isn't a train crash. And these do occur. They happen in Europe. They happen here. So this is a huge concern. And I'm looking here at some notes you had sent me, and one of the things you stated in bold, and it really does stand out to me, is we are the guinea pigs in this venture.
Yeah, Florida is truly the guinea pig. They are already starting transport, and we know for sure because we've seen the documentation going from, for example, Hialeah to the Port Everglades, and they shipped, as I said, tens of millions of gallons for, I believe it was Barbados. Okay, and so we know it's occurring, and it's going right through major metropolitan parts of Miami-Dade. So it is a concern.
It's a very frightening thing for certain. Let's talk a little bit more about your legal battle and where people can go to find out more information and to help donate. And you had said you had joined what's called WALLS.
Yes. What we did initially was we had started this website, and then we got the attention of a group called WALLS, and they are part of the Riverkeeper Network. There is extensive Riverkeeper Network in Florida and extends into Georgia as well. And a man named John Quarterman, who is a very well-known environmentalist, he is offered to help us to take on because we were able to find the legal firm, but we didn't have the money to be able to pay for it. And the legal firm has said, look, we'll cut back our cost and expenses. We'll give you, just give us the money. And then we won't keep coming back. So we've agreed on a price. And John has said, I'm interested enough, and I'm going to take the lead on this. And so if people are interested, there is a website where they can go on, and maybe you can put it on to your.
Well, I will. We will post it under this video here after the show, definitely. And donations are very important. That's the key to being able to fight something like this. And again, this is the Federal Energy Regulation Commission. This is the government. This is the commission that is there to protect our health, safety, and welfare. So not having any regulations, with something as dangerous as LNG, as explosive as it is.
Well, I think we're in an environment, this is a personal opinion, but I believe we're in an environment right now where business comes first. Mm-hmm. And we've seen where environmental regulations have been reduced at the cost of for more profit for business. And right now, this is the environment we're in, and we have to find ways to protect ourselves and find groups that will help us to establish and keep us safe.
And that's what many people feel is it's profit over lives. And, it should not be that at all. Tell us the state. You'd mentioned that the one plant in Hialeah, LNG plant, but we also heard there was one supposed to be going up in Brevard with Florida East Coast Railway. Has that came to fruition?
Yeah, no, it hasn't. And the reason why is because a group up in Cocoa Beach and up in that area, they all got together and they had a lawyer write a letter and state the regulation and said, you can't build here based on where you want to build because you're too close to the airport. And there is a regulation that says you cannot have these storage facilities too close. And since then, nothing has happened. It stopped. And they keep talking about it, but from what we can see, they have not been able to move forward on this plan.
That is good news. But it is still being transported down, and LNG is still being transported down the FEC Tracks.
This is our understanding, yes.
And just a quick overview of that, the freight division is now owned by Grupo Mexico, which is a Mexican company that owns FECR's railroad tracks. They took over the freight. But Brightline is owned by SoftBank, which also owns Fortress, and that is a Japanese company. So we have two foreign entities running on these tracks. Not sure who's going to be responsible even for the safety upgrades. Yeah,
and there's an insurance question as to whether they actually will have insurance. But let me comment on that a moment. Of course, now you have Virgin involved in this, Virgin Transit. And of course, Virgin Brightline now, however you want to call it. But also, there is a relationship between Richard Branson and Wes Edens. And he was a co-chair, I believe it was, of Fortress, and which is now, of course, part of Grupo Mexico. And he's been very involved in LNG holdings and American LNG marketing. So now, in my view, look, passenger trains are not going to make a lot of money. We know that.
Right.
So where are they going to make their money? So they're going to work on putting in more track and getting more freight lines. And the big money is transport of LNG and other specialty chemicals, because that's what you pay for, is transport of very difficult to haul products. So this is going to be really the golden goose for them, and it's our belief.
And I believe you with that, because LNG is something they have been focusing on for several years now, quite a bit. And as you said, you can take 10 tanker cars in one transport. So you can transport a lot of LNG at once. So this is something, folks, it's all convoluted. We got a lot of passenger, we got freight, but this LNG is scary business. And it's not the gas that's firing up your propane tank or heating your homes. So let's make sure our elected officials are aware. Paul, Laura, thank you so much for coming in. I'd love to have you back, and we'll have some more discussions. This is very important.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you.